In this video, I'm going to talk about how to do a two-stage stall for your two-liner or other high aspect ratio glider. And while this is a technique you'll need for those hotter gliders, you can absolutely perform it on any glider. And before trying this on a two-liner or anything hotter, I recommend first being really comfortable with stalls and backfly in general on an E and B or an E and A glider, so you'll have a good skill set to start with. I'm going to first show a full speed third-person view of a two-stage stall so you can get an idea of what it looks like before going into breaking it down in slow motion. So I like to think of describing the two-stage stall as similar to a landing flare. I'm going to start from trim speed. I'm going to break enough to pitch the glider back about 1 or 2 chord lengths, and you can use the horizon or the sun in the side of the clip as a reference point of how much I've pitched the glider. I'm going to break to pitch it back, and then continue breaking deeper to get to the point at which the tips begin to stall. I'm going to hold the stall just a little bit longer so the tips fully stall and then release my hands up for a moment. I don't want to continue stalling much more than this because if the whole glider stalls while the tips are back, there's a chance of developing a line over or having a really messy, ugly stall. So it's very important on these high aspect ratio gliders, which bend a lot, to have this step of going hands up. And what I'm looking for is to see the tips come forward. And the moment I see them regaining their shape, I start to break again so that they don't outfly too much. As I come back down on the brakes to prevent the tips from flying out too much in the front, I will then end up stalling the center of the glider. And at that moment, the whole glider is stalled, and then I can proceed to holding my hands in the backfly position, which will be roughly about carabiner height. Once I wait a few moments for the glider to stabilize in backfly, and I have a clean, stable backfly to work with, I can begin the exit process whenever I'm ready. What I'm trying to do during the exit is to have the glider pitched a little bit in front of me so that I can start to release the brakes and reduce the size of those collapses so that when the glider flies, it'll be fully open. I'm holding back as much brake as I need to keep the glider pitched in front of me without allowing it to go too far, but also making sure that I release the brakes before it has a chance to begin pitching backwards. So I'm going to be using the horizon relative to the leading edge as a reference point for the moments of when to release or keep or even add a little bit of brake. Here the glider is pitching forward, so I add a little bit of brake to slow it down, and then as it slows down, I start to release the brakes a little bit. And then once I see the forward motion has ceased entirely, I can go all the way hands up, and the glider won't even shoot on me. Here's another view with a split screen of the same stall shot from the outside, just to give a different perspective of it. And we'll break this one down in slow motion as well. So just like before, I start from trim speed, pitch the glider back 1 or 2 chord lengths, continue braking until the tip stalls. When they're bent back, I go forward. When they go forward, I start to brake back down. I come back down into my backfly position, settle into my backfly for a moment, and then put the glider in front of me and start the exit process. In this particular example, I end up with a very small stuck tip on the left because the backfly wasn't totally stable and that collapse was just a little bit too large, so a bit of fabric ends up getting stuck. It's not a big problem if this happens. You can see that I can clear it with just a little bit of a pump, but the way to avoid that is to be a little more patient and have a stable backfly and go a little bit higher in the brakes to make those collapses smaller and less likely to get caught. In this one, I end up with an asymmetric stall entry that requires just a little bit more time to stabilize in the backfly. So I want to talk about how to control the backfly a little bit better, which hopefully you already have some practice with. So again, pitching the glider back a bit, stalling the tips, coming up with the hands, seeing the tips come forward, coming back down, seeing the center stall. But in this case, the stall is a little bit asymmetric. You can see that the glider isn't the same right and left. So as I enter the backfly, I'm going to have a little extra small spinning motion. And because of that extra motion, I have to be a little more patient, center my body, keep my hands nice and symmetric, and just give the glider a moment for those oscillations to dampen out. And once they're dampened out, I can start the same exit process of releasing my hands just a little bit so the glider gets a chance to come forward, and then controlling the speed of that forward pitch so it's not too much, but keeping the glider out in front of me as I start to release the brakes. Right here, I happen to release a little bit early, and the glider again wants to move forward, so I add just a dab of brakes and then come off again just to control that little extra shoot. And then for a further refined stall, you want to avoid deforming the profile too much to get a really nice clean stall without it bending too much. And this is a more advanced technique, just something to practice for precision. So here I'm trying to not let the glider bend so much before coming back up. But the issue is if I don't stall it enough, the center wants to begin to pitch forward, which isn't a great position for the stall to happen from because it tends to stall a little bit more violently. So I'm having to balance having the glider regain its shape without having it leave the position it is behind me. So I go up a little bit to have the tips begin to fly, and then I come back down to keep the glider behind me, and I end up doing a couple cycles of this, trying to keep the glider mostly open. Once I see it stall here, now I can again go into my more controlled backfly, and you see it stays nice and symmetric, straight into a well-controlled backfly. It pitches forward. I can control the speed of that pitch, start to release the brakes, keeping it parallel to the horizon the whole way out. Thanks for watching, everybody. I do teach SIV and acro in Turkey every spring and fall. So if you would like to connect with me, visit my website, beyondsiv.com, or Goodness Gravity on Instagram. See you next time.